Welcome to Military Analytics. For example, leaders of countries with economic problems worry about going bankrupt. The concern of the leaders of countries with terrorist problems is to ensure the security of their country. All these problems are related to reasons such as the politics of the leaders, the geographical location of the countries, and global crisis. The most important of these reasons is undoubtedly the policy of the country's leaders. Because a leader can make a country a superpower or cause its destruction. After Russian leader Vladimir Putin began his attempt to invade Ukraine, many of Putin's concerns arose. Economic problems, rebellions within the country, fires of unknown origin, problems in diplomacy and politics, sanctions by Western and European countries, and many other problems are drowning Russian leader Vladimir Putin in a pool of worries. Putin's biggest concern is undoubtedly being assassinated because Vladimir Putin thinks only of himself and not of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers he lost during his invasion of Ukraine. Forced to live with fear of being assassinated at any moment, Putin has become almost paranoid in this report before discussing the assassination attempts against Russian leader Vladimir Putin and the measures taken by Putin in the aftermath of these assassination attempts. Let us take a closer look at the new assassination allegation that has recently surfaced. According to the German press, the Ukrainian Secret Service attempted to assassinate Putin with a Ukrainian drone carrying 17 kilograms of explosives. According to the allegations, a Ukrainian J-22 drone took off from Ukraine towards Russia. The other day, one of Ukraine's most modern drones, the J-22, has a range of 800 kilometers. With this drone, the Ukrainian Secret Service targeted a region near Moscow 500 kilometers from Ukraine. Because Russian leader Vladimir Putin was going to visit this region, Ukrainian intelligence had access to this secret information. Yuri Romanenko, a journalist with alleged close ties to Ukrainian intelligence and founder of the Ukrainian Institute for the Future, claimed responsibility for the alleged assassination in a letter. Romanenko described the details of the operation in which they targeted Russian leader Vladimir Putin with a drone as follows: last week, our intelligence officers received information about Putin's trip to the Rudnev Industrial Park. According to our kamikaze drone, Surkov, which flew through all the air defenses of the Russian Federation and crashed not far from the industrial park. The Russian media reported news confirming Romanenko's statements. According to these reports, a huge Magnet U drone was indeed shot down near the village of Vorovskogo, east of Moscow. Moreover, the crash site of the drone was about 20 kilometers east of Rudnev Industrial Park, as stated by Yuri Romanenko, who claimed responsibility for the assassination. Russian media also shared details about the downtown. Accordingly, the drone had 30 C4 explosives weighing 17 kilograms. After the downturn, Putin's presence in the area was questioned. Kremlin correspondent Pavel Zarubin made a statement on this issue. This statement also confirmed the allegations because Zarubin said that Putin was planning to visit an industrial zone in Moscow. However, no announcement was made about the time of this visit. Another development confirming the assassination allegations was the images shared by Russian citizens on their social media accounts. Russians posted photos showing painted grass in the area where the attack took place. This was interpreted as the Rudnev Industrial Park being prepared for Putin's visit. Russian authorities have not commented on this issue. Despite Romanenko claiming responsibility for the assassination and Russian media reports confirming the assassination, however, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was forced to make a statement after the assassination allegations appeared in the world press. Although this statement was not directly related to the alleged assassination, it implicitly concerned the assassination. In a statement, Pascal said Russian President Vladimir Putin works in the Kremlin. The head of the state is not planning any major public event. Pascal's statement was a denial of the allegations made in the world press, in particular by Yuri Romanenko, who claimed responsibility for the assassination. It should be noted, however, that the statement was not about the downing of the drone, but about the denial that Putin was the target because it was quite normal for drones of the Ukrainian army to be shot down on Russian territory. The Ukrainian army crossed the occupied territories and reached Russian territory. The claim was that the downturn was flown to assassinate Putin. Iranian authorities did not make a statement about the downtrodden. One of the people who made a statement was Ukrainian expert Sergei Suliny. Suliny made a very important point with his statement. Even if the downtrodden did not take off to assassinate Putin, the downing of the drone on Russian territory was a success. Soleimani said the following about this issue in a statement. It is clear that a precision attack on the Russian president with a kamikaze drone is almost impossible. But the fact that such a drone will reach the place where Putin plans to stay is a slap in the face of the Russian dictator. The alleged assassination of Russian leader Vladimir Putin brought to mind a development from the past. In the first year of the war, an assassination attempt was made on Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The source of this news was the British media. According to the news, the left front tire of the vehicle in which Vladimir Putin was traveling was shot. Putin had been saved from this assassination attempt and was taken to a safe area immediately afterwards. Putin, who has lost hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens, his prestige against Western and European countries, and his closest friend since the day he started the occupation of Ukraine, is being cornered day by day, backed into a corner. Putin lives with a fear and anxiety of being assassinated every day. Russian anti-occupation organizations and Ukrainian partisan groups are among the groups that make Putin nervous because these groups are the main suspects in unsolved murders and fires of unknown origin on Russian soil. Putin's fear is also evident in his actions. In recent months, there have been a series of developments that prove Putin's fear. One of these developments was the installation of air defense systems on the roofs of public buildings in Russia, including Putin's home. The Russian leader cannot hide his fear. Another development that would prove Putin's fear of death had emerged in recent months. Putin had a railroad line laid under his house, and this was not a claim, but a fact confirmed by satellite images. Since the Russian leader knew that Russian anti-occupation organizations and Ukrainian sabotage groups could kill him at any moment, he had built secret railway lines and stations in certain parts of the city, starting from his house. Putin used this line for his transportation within the city. The Russian leader seems to be failing in his invasion of Ukraine with his growing anxiety and fear. The war between Ukraine and Russia is escalating rapidly. The Ukrainian army increased the strength of its offensive in Bakhmut and Kreminna on land. Russian forces claim to have captured Solder, a small salt mining town a few miles north of Bakhmut. The Russian offensive, led by the notorious Wagner Group private military company, repulsed the Ukrainian defenders. But the town was still controversial. Russian forces are paying for their small advances with extremely heavy losses. Russian forces lose an average of 500 soldiers every day beyond the obvious force generation problem posed by this high casualty rate. It also demoralizes the Russians. The most striking example of this high casualty pattern was experienced in the Shoulder region the other day. The fight for Solder as well as Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine has turned into some of the most violent clashes of the war ever. In fact, Andriy Yermak, head of the presidency of Ukraine, refers to the longest and most combat in the First World War and states that Solder is the Verdun of the 21st century. In Ukraine, the most fierce battle on the front line of the war is currently Solidar. Today Ukraine wiped out the entire Russian military unit in Solidar with a single HIMARS attack. The HIMARS attack, in which the Ukrainian armed forces targeted the Russian Wagner camp, took place amid conflicting reports about Solidar's fate. After following a unit of troops to a house in Solidar, Ukraine removed about 25 soldiers of the Russian platoon in a single attack. The small salt mining town has witnessed some of the war's fiercest skirmishes for months. Footage of the attack raises questions about Russian tactics after soldiers were easily pursued by Ukrainian forces. In the video footage shared on social media platforms, it can be clearly seen that Russian forces are walking on a train track in the snow-covered terrain. The armed unit was then traced to a building that the Russians used as a shelter. Ukrainian forces blew up the house with a HIMARS missile with the accurate shot of the HIMARS missile. The Russian shelter was blown up. As huge smoke rises to the Ukrainian skies, we see that the entire building is wiped off the face of the earth with a single blow. In this operation, we see the success of the drone operators of the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukraine has succeeded in changing all the doctrines in the modern world, front and street wars, and even in naval warfare. Offensive reconnaissance, kamikaze, and lightly armed bomb-laden drones so skillfully used by the Ukrainian army are the key guerrilla tactic that changed the course of the war. We see how effective and vital they are, especially when combined with very destructive weapons like HIMARS. In recent weeks, Ukrainian drones have started to come to the fore even more. It has now been proven that the war technologies of the future will definitely be on unmanned aerial vehicles. We frequently witness that Russia, which we thought had the second largest army in the world before the Ukraine war, was destroyed by the Kiev military units. Even a single HIMARS has the potential to cause serious losses to Russia. The supply of longer-range firing systems and precision-guided artillery shells to Kiev by the United States and other NATO countries was an important step that put Ukraine ahead of Russia. These systems have proven to be both highly effective and sustainable, as the Current Affairs YouTube channel. All of our findings are created by the work and analysis of our field warfare expert team and are based on data from the US, UK, Russia, and Ukraine, Ministry of Defense, and independent war analysis and monitoring sources. After the soldier attacks, heavy fighting broke out in the suburbs of Bakhmut in the settlement of Kaliska, located a few kilometers from Bakhmut. Fierce clashes took place between the Ukrainian army and units of the Wagner PMC. The Chaika enclave is a key settlement that provides an opportunity for the tactical encirclement of Bakhmut. In the video footage shot by Ukrainian soldiers, we noticed that the armed forces of Ukraine are actively using armored vehicles and firing quite heavily from various types of weapons. Also, judging by the use of handheld anti-tank grenade launchers, combat engagements are conducted at a relatively short distance. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly where such video footage was shot in the Kleshefo region, but we think that the Ukrainian troops are outside the fortifications. There is also the possibility that the video footage will show an attempt to counterattack in this direction to push the front line of Ukrainian troops eastward. After losing control over Solder, the Ukrainian armed forces shifted about 3,000 troops to the Bakhmut area, thereby significantly strengthening the city's defenses. We see that the Moscow army has experienced a serious decrease in ammunition reserves due to the long-term and still continuing war in Ukraine. It is clear that Russia's using the S-300 and S-400 air defense systems to hit ground targets, and Moscow's ballistic missile stocks are declining. Ukrainian intelligence claims that Russia has less than 100 modern Iskander ballistic munitions left. At the same time, Ukrainian intelligence states that Russia instead uses the S-300 and S-400 systems. Due to the abundance of ammunition, declining stockpiles of weapons could become key issues for both sides in a war that has lasted almost 11 months and looks set to continue as the war drags on. Ukraine presses its Western supporters to supply its forces with tanks, particularly the German-designed Leopard model. Britain has promised Ukraine 14 Challenger 2 tanks this weekend, making it the first Western country to supply the heavy tanks Kiev demands. Peskov predicted that they would have little influence in Ukraine's war effort. The Polish Prime Minister recently urged the German government to supply Kiev with a wide range of weapons and express hope that Berlin would soon approve the transfer of battle tanks in the 47th week of the brutal war initiated by Vladimir Putin. The Russian army continues to kill Ukrainian civilians. Over the weekend, the Russian army launched a new wave of missiles against Ukraine. The last missile attack targeted civilian targets in Dnipro. A Russian missile struck a large 9-story residential building, killing at least 30 people and injuring many more. The Ukrainian Air Force claims that the Russian army hit the building with Kh-22 Kitchen anti-ship missile. Kiev blamed Moscow for the attack, but the Kremlin declared that Russian forces were not responsible. The Kremlin cited an unsubstantiated theory circulating on social media that the Ukrainian air defense systems were causing the damage. But as the Ukrainian war drags on and Russian strategy continues to rely heavily on missile attacks on Ukraine's critical infrastructure and urban centers, the Russian arsenal is likely to be quickly depleted. Since October, Russia has launched more than 1,100 ballistic and cruise missiles at Ukraine, although the Ukrainian army intercepted dozens of Russian cruise missiles. They passed enough to inflict significant damage after Russia's recent missile attacks. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky once again asked the West to support his country with air defense. The Ukrainian army will receive MiM-104 Patriot air defense systems from the USA and Germany, but it will take some time before the weapons systems are delivered to a Ukraine that desperately needs protection from Russian air attacks. In addition, Russia has been forced to leave many areas captured by a successful Ukrainian counterattack in recent months. The Kremlin is poised to take decisive strategic action over the next 6 months, possibly with a view to regaining the initiative and ending Ukraine's current operational successes. We think that the Russian military command is making serious preparations for an expanded mobilization effort, saving mobilized personnel for future use while trying to increase military industrial production and reorganize the command structure. The security of the West and the Eastern European bloc, especially the EU and the USA, is directly related to the security of both the Middle East and Central Asia. And now the Black Sea is at the heart of this relation. Dozens of Russian warships and battle boats have so far been destroyed by the Ukrainian Navy and artillery in the waters of the Black Sea and on the Ukrainian river Dnipro. The interesting part was the artillery's ability to destroy Russian boats. This is a rare occurrence, but in Dnipro this has now become normal. And in the last few weeks, nearly a dozen Russian assault boats have been sunk by artillery. Let's examine the critical events in and around the Black Sea and how the Russian attack boats were sunk, with the latest striking details. The Black Sea is not just a geographical area or a basin that can be handled with a focus on economy and security. It is also important how the perceptions about the Black Sea are shaped on a regional and country basis and what it means for different actors. For Russia, the Black Sea contains many arguments to be discussed in terms of gas supply lines passing through here being of critical importance in terms of trade routes and ensuring the security of the country. With the disintegration of the Soviet Union, most of the countries bordering the Black Sea came out of Russian influence and became closer to the West and became members of NATO and the European Union. The Black Sea has become one of the geographies where the rivalry between the East and the West is seen most clearly. The increasing influence of the West in the Black Sea causes Western states to be more interested in this geography. On the other hand, Russia is trying to reduce the influence of Western alliances, especially NATO in the Black Sea. Georgia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Ukraine, which have coasts on the Black Sea, do not have any other sea exits other than the Black Sea. These countries are extremely sensitive to developments in the Black Sea because most of the energy and goods flow is provided through the Black Sea. The Black Sea is also of great importance for Turkey's security. For example, Crimea is only 278 kilometers from the Anatolian coastline, considering Turkey's northern tip as Ukraine and its southern tip of Syria. The critical importance of the Black Sea for Turkey can be understood more clearly, especially in this critical naval area where it is claimed that Russia's Su-27 fighter jet and the US MQ-9 Reaper unmanned aerial vehicle collide nowadays. The Ukrainian armed forces have started to take serious steps to increase their dominance in recent days. The most critical area in these stormy waters is the Crimean Peninsula, the key strategic center of the Ukrainian-Russian war. In order to recapture the peninsula, Ukrainian forces have carried out serious offensive operations both in the Kherson region and in the Dnipro River region, especially these days. The past day, the Ukrainian defense forces in the southern regions of Ukraine eliminated 15 invaders and destroyed a Grad multiple rocket launch system on Kinburn Island. Following this attack on the left bank of the Dnipro River, Ukrainian forces also eliminated the missile launcher of an S-300 anti-aircraft system, with the Ukrainian forces besieging Dnipro. The Russians began to look for exit routes in the river with their attack boats, but the striking operations of the Ukrainian armed forces continued at full speed. The Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian ammunition depot, 2 reconnaissance UAVs, 2 motorboats intended for use by the Russian military forces, an artillery radar system, and several military trucks. In an offensive along the line, stretching from the Novokakhovka region to Dnipro, the destruction of 2 Russian attack boats in this offensive operation limited the reconnaissance and sabotage activities of the Russians in Dnipro. In addition, Ukrainian forces continued to advance along this front line without stopping after this attack in the direction of Tavria. The Ukrainian defense forces succeeded in sinking another Russian boat near Bilhorod Island in Dnipro. The Russian motorboat in the river were being destroyed one by the Ukrainian forces. Until the end of these attacks, Russian troops had lost 3 boats in total within 2 days. According to the latest data, these boats were out of the game as a result of the successful firing of the Ukrainian artillery unit. On the other hand, the Ukrainian forces who managed to take Dnipro into their hands destroyed 5 Russian attack boats carrying Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups in the week before their attacks near Tavria. Again, With the shootings of the Ukrainian artillery and the sinking of the Russian boats carrying out a reconnaissance and detection mission in Dnipro, the invading forces had to protect the areas they were in the Dnipro River region. Therefore, the Russians began to maintain only a defensive position in this region. These operations, which turned Dnipro into a ring of fire, took place in just 2 weeks. In summary, the Ukrainian armed forces blew up a total of 3 Russian assault boats in just 48 hours, and the total of 8 attack boats in 2 weeks. At present, the chances of the Russians launching a counterattack on the Dnipro River are considered very low. On the other hand, the dominance of Ukrainian forces in and around Kherson continues. In fact, all these attacks are steps that lead to success in the plans of the Ukrainian armed forces to seize the Crimean Peninsula. Ukraine's taking control of both the Dnipro and Kherson regions is important in terms of retargeting Crimea. The fact that the tension in Kherson and Dnipro has reached such a high level also worries the Russian forces and residents of the region who are normally on the peninsula. The residents of Crimea are quite justified in these concerns. The reason for this is the possible major offensive of the Ukrainian forces targeting the Crimean Peninsula, which is seen as the Pearl of the Black Sea. The road to victory for Ukraine passes through the Crimea. Therefore, the liberation of Crimea this year could change everything in this war. So the focus of Kiev's allies should be primarily helping Ukraine liberate Crimea. This should be the main effort when using first saving in the east to slow or stop Russia's ground attacks. Ukraine knows it will never be safe as long as Russian forces occupy the peninsula. Any peace treaty that really results in Russia holding these lands allows the Kremlin to wait 2 or 3 years until the West loses interest. During this time, the Russians rebuilt their army, correct their mistakes, and restart their war against Ukraine. After all, Russia has been using this tactic as a model since about 2008. To liberate Crimea means first to make the peninsula untenable for the Russian army, navy, and air force, and then to occupy it. It should start with isolating the omniterrestrial communication line, connecting the peninsula to Russia using long-range precision strikes. The Kerch Bridge, already badly damaged by Ukrainian forces, and the so-called land bridge connecting Crimea to Russia via Mariupol and Melitopol along the coastline of the Sea of Azov should be one of the first targets. Targeting this transport infrastructure will initiate the isolation of Crimea from supplier movement. It is highly likely that the possible operation of the striking Crimean plan of Ukraine will be, as we mentioned, because other alternatives are quite risky. For this reason, Ukrainians should first take control of the Kerch Bridge, which is the connecting bridge to Crimea and other strategic centers to the peninsula. On the other hand, the Russian army has the superior will to win this critical Crimean process. Ukrainians defend their homeland and are supported by a coalition of 50 nations. Russia, on the other hand, only has allies such as Iran and North Korea. Russian soldiers do not particularly want to be in the Crimean Peninsula. And the Russian people who are happy enough to wave a flag do not want to join the army. You may recall that about 500,000 Russian men of military age had left the country to avoid partial mobilization. Meanwhile, despite the low stockpiles of ammunition, Ukraine's logistics are steadily improving, thanks to the support of the coalition. Russia's logistics, on the other hand, are getting worse and worse thanks to sanctions weaken corrupt governance over consumption and precision strikes by Ukraine's precision weapons. In other words, the Russian army fell far behind the Ukrainian forces, both in terms of soldiers to fight at the front and in ammunition supply. Russia currently has 97% of its army in Ukraine, and yet they cannot even capture the small town of Bakhmut in the east of Ukraine, defended mainly by regional defense forces and National Guard units of the Ukrainian armed forces. It seems very difficult for the Russians who could not capture the small city to hold a peninsula like Crimea, which is strategic and open to attack from every angle.